Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody, to our ninth Athlete to Entrepreneur panel. With this being the ninth panel, if I'm doing my math correctly, that means we brought you over 30 stories, interviews, presentations of athletes turned entrepreneurs from 30 different people. I'm not even talking about the Thrive After Sports podcast. I'm talking about just the Athlete to Entrepreneur panels. So, with that being said, if you are, first of all, thank you for joining us. Excuse me, where are my manners? If you are a current athlete, a former athlete, a parent of an athlete, a coach, someone who works in an athletic department, I highly encourage you, number one, to take notes, listen to yourself and the stories of these athletes, turned entrepreneurs that you're about to hear from. Feel free to ask questions. You know, we will be doing interview style, but all these amazing people are happy to answer questions for you. And what else did I want to say? The reason we do these, just to set the tone as we go into this, the reason we do these athlete to entrepreneur panels is to show that next generation of athletes that it's not just LeBron James, it's not just some of the household names that you may know, it's everyday people like you and I who are doing big things in the world. So let's get into it. I want you to hear from some of these phenomenal people. We have another fire lineup of athletes turned entrepreneurs for you today. As always, we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get in. We're going to get into this thing with a good friend of mine, Miss Erika Fay. Erika is a certified life mastery consultant, a licensed psychotherapist with over 20 years of experience. She's the founder of Maximum Achievement Coaching, where she works with professional and collegiate athletes, as well as entrepreneurs and business professionals all around the world. As a sought after coach and international speaker, Erika specializes in delivering inspiring workshops, as well as transformational in depth coaching programs with a dynamic approach that turns ideas into life changing action to help clients achieve new heights of success. Please welcome the athlete to entrepreneur, Erika Fay.
Hi, Taj.
Hi, Erika.
It's great to see you. Good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking some time to be with us on a Saturday. Definitely appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I usually kind of wrap up with acknowledgments, but I'm gonna do it a little differently this time and start out with some acknowledgments because Erika,
Okay.
you were one of the first people, and it's crazy to think it's been almost 3 years at this point, but you were one of the first people in 2018 to really show me love, really give me some words of encouragement about what I was doing, what I was looking to accomplish in the athlete transition space. So we fast forward 3 years, you've always consistently checked in, always showed me love, always, asked if there's any way you can support. And I just wanted to acknowledge you for that and say thank you for all that you do before we get
Oh,
into it. So,
thanks. It's my pleasure. And it's always, I've said this to you in private, but I really am of the mind that when people's heart are in the right place and they really want to serve others, anything I can do to support that. So it's my pleasure to be looped back in with you again and to see all of the awesome stuff that you're doing, Taj. It's awesome.
thank you, Erika. I appreciate that. Well, I'm gonna put my Kleenex away for a second. We'll get into the discussion today. I don't even know if you and I have had this conversation, so this might be the first time I'm hearing some of this info too. But let's
Okay.
just start it out with kind of how your career transitioned after you left Purdue. You were a water polo player at Purdue.
Mhm.
Did
Mhm.
you have aspirations to go to the Olympics, or what was sort of the tail end of your career like?
Yeah, so I was a high school swimmer, and then at Purdue, we actually started, my friend and I, and then we recruited a couple of other women to start the women's water polo team at Purdue. So we started off practicing with the boys, and that ended very quickly because they did not want us there. So we just decided to start our own team. And to be really honest, water polo was kind of a newer thing to me. So I really didn't anticipate playing beyond college. But I did know, I remember my last tournament at Purdue I was a senior, and I remember like the whistle blew, it was over, and I was floating on my back and looking up at the ceiling in the pool and just thinking, okay, this is it. And I knew in that moment that I needed something else athletic. So I made the decision actually in that moment that I was going to start becoming an endurance athlete. And then I started getting into marathons and triathlons and Ironman triathlons from there.
Yeah, and I know you still do. You're still very active. You are. We'll get to this later, but you are a forever athlete,
Yeah.
As Corey Camp always says. So
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that you actually started. You and a friend started the water polo team at Purdue.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So would you say because you didn't have aspirations of playing at a professional level that gave you more of a softer landing after you graduated into the real world, as we say?
Definitely, definitely. I was blessed also with knowing that I just always wanted, ever since I was a kid, I loved helping people. So when I made the decision to choose a major, I think it was like halfway through my freshman year, I knew I wanted to become a therapist. So I was just like, I love supporting people. I love helping people. So that was another passion of mine. So I was, and I don't think this is common. So I don't expect that everyone would have this journey. But I honestly think, and this is part of how I work with my clients too, I have a spirituality component that has always been really important to me. And I kind of always look to that as a guide. And so knowing that I wanted to serve people in my profession, in a career as a therapist, and then also having kind of an outlet for my athletic and kind of physical, I liked pushing myself. So I wanted to get that in both arenas, from my career and from my amateur athletic pursuits outside of water polo.
Right. So at the time when you graduated, and it's fascinating that freshman year, you already knew that you wanted to be a therapist. I don't think a lot of, not just athletes, but people in general know what they want to do freshman year.
Right.
So props to you for having that clear vision. And then how did you know that you wanted to support specifically in the transition space? Because I mean, that was, even when you and I first connected, that was still a fairly new arena. So when you say you wanted to work with athletes, was it with anything specific, or did you already have transition in mind at the time?
Yeah, no, it kind of evolved. So I worked in a bunch of different settings as a therapist, knowing that at some point I wanted to start a private practice, and I was kind of too scared to do it for a number of years. But I'm really grateful for all of the experience. I worked in community mental health on the west side of Chicago. I worked in foster care. I worked in a hospital setting. And I worked in a corporate setting. So I got a lot of experience as a therapist before I kind of hung my shingle and had a private practice. And then once I did that, once I opened the doors for my private practice, it was kind of this interesting phenomenon where these athletes and their wives were finding me, because I'm a marriage and family therapist. So they were coming to me for couples therapy. And through that process, working with a number of different athletes, I started to notice that there were some gaps in the transition resources. And even if they were there, and the athlete like accessing them for whatever reason, and also noticed that there was a really nice synergy between kind of me and the athletes and their spouses. And so from that space, it kind of gave birth to a new vision, because I thought I was living my dream. But when I started working with these athletes in a clinical setting for relationship therapy, I started to think like, wow, it would be really useful to have some support with kind of transitioning away from sport. Some of the athletes were still competing, some weren't, but that kind of opened my eyes to the need. And then I really made the decision from there to get certified as a coach, and then started maximum achievement coaching from that need that I experienced as I was a therapist. But it was funny because I remember thinking to myself, wait, I thought I was living my dream. Now this is a new dream. So like now I have way more knowledge about how that works because I've been studying it for the last 7 years, but it was an interesting kind of shift.
Yeah, so it sounds like you identifying those gaps while, like you said, talking to the spouses or significant others of athletes was the thing that had you make the leap to going into your own practice. It was that. It's almost like because you resonate, and you're a forever athlete, that was the thing that you felt so passionately about, that you were like, this is the spark I've been looking for. Would you say that was the spark that was like, I have to go into my own practice now?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of, I did wind up going into my private practice before I evolved, like before I got the athletes in my client base. But that was definitely the thing that was the impetus for me getting certified as a coach.
Got it. Okay, so that's what led to maximum achievement.
Yes.
Maximum achievement. Okay, that's what it was. I got it.
Yeah.
But you already had the private practice beforehand. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. You know, we're here. This is Athlete to Entrepreneur. We're here to talk about the business side of things as well.
Yep.
So, what was the number one? It's a two-part question. What was the decision like for you to be like, okay, now is the time to start my private practice? And then what was the road like to getting there? If you can give us a little bit behind the scenes on that aspect of it.
Totally. Well, like, I think I said this a little bit earlier, like I knew I wanted to be a business owner and have a private practice because I had a vision for my life about how I would, plan my clients around my kids and all of this stuff, which wound up happening way later in my life. But I started, first of all, in my private practice, I hired a business coach, and that was really useful to kind of help get things up and running for me. But when I made the decision to actually do it, I was still working at a hospital. And I started to notice there was this like kind of dread that I would have before going into work, which I thought was really surprising because I loved working with my clients. But I started to feel into that. And I was like, okay, so maybe this is the time, because the dread going to work, like doing things that I would love to do, I was kind of getting curious about that. And so kind of the discontent kind of ramped up. And that's when I was like, okay, I gotta do this. I gotta start my business. And I will say that I asked my supervisor, and I didn't really think that she was going to give me the answer that she gave me, but I asked my supervisor, I was like, would it be possible for me to go down to part-time so I could work at the hospital and then build my practice at the same time? And I'm like, they're inundated with clients. They definitely need me to stay. And she was like, no, we need you to stay on full time. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to quit. And then I remember I went in my office and I closed the door. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just quit my job. I was like, what did I just do? So it was kind of like one of those things that I'm like, okay, well, I can't really turn back now.
Wow, that's such a cool story. That's like a movie moment like there where you're like, well, I can't turn back now. And I think a lot of people, you touched on the dread or the disdain for what you're doing, because work is such a big part of our lives. And I think a lot of people feel that, but don't necessarily take the leap. And I'm being a little bit biased now. I have to, we're talking to athletes, but right. I think a lot of athletes have a little bit more tendency to be able to make that leap and just say, I'm going to go for it. I succeeded in this other arena. I mean, if we can tap into that as athletes, it makes it easier to make that shift, because you're used to having your back against the wall and having to fight to reach your goal.
Yes.
Do you think that it kind of fueled you a little? I mean, it probably fueled you when she was like, you just told her you're going to quit on the spot. You're just like, well, I'm going to have to quit. You just did it just like.
I told her if I can't go down to part-time, I will have to quit, like in that conversation. And then she was like, well, we need you full-time. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to quit. It's like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I knew I was loving my practice because I was building it at the same time, but I was noticing like all of my energy, I want to do what I'm doing after work, not in work, like here. So I was noticing that pull. And so that's what made me take the leap, because I'm like, I really am energized by this. And if I can't focus on that during the day, at least 2 days a week or 3 days a week, then I don't want to do this anymore. But it was scary. Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. The scary side of it. This is what I want to get into, because this is a pivotal moment. This is like watching a documentary right now by hearing this. So she says, no, you can't be part-time. You say you quit. And then, and this applies across the board, because obviously you're a therapist, but whether you're a therapist or a business owner, there's a period where you left your job, your safety net was, you removed the safety net, and now you're like, okay, I have to get these first few clients and build up a book of business. What was some of that process like, while also battling the fear of like, is this gonna work out?
Yeah, well, here's something. So what I'm seeing in retrospect about my journey is so aligned with what I work with my clients on. Is like, if you really are passionate about something, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, kind of organizes to support you in that. So like I said, I was working at the hospital and kind of seeing like my private practice clients at night. And then when I was thinking about, I want to just go all in on this private practice, of course I had all of the things. what about your insurance? I have asthma. It's very well controlled. I've had it since I was a kid, but my medication, if without insurance, costs a lot of money. So that was a big, like, oh my gosh, you don't have benefit. And I was single, so I didn't have like a, husband or spouse or partner to kind of fall back on to support. So I'm like, you've got your own bills. What about benefits? And, so you think of all the things. But I have to admit, the minute I made that decision, that firm decision, and said, I guess I have to quit, I think that day I got like 3 new calls for my private practice. And that was without doing any advertising. I was paneled with one insurance company, Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO, and people were just finding me on there. So that was just, I felt like, I like to say God's way of nudging me, like, you're doing the right thing. But it didn't happen until I made that decision and said I'm quitting, because the referrals were kind of sporadic up until that point.
Right. Yeah. This, I wanted to ask you too, because you mentioned family, and you said one of your goals in your long-term vision was to be able to spend time with your family. Mm-hmm. So, as a therapist, as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur, how do you manage all these different moving parts and also make sure that you allocate time to be a great mother as well?
That's a good question. Well, I'm still kind of working with that one. My son he's going to be 2 in August. So I definitely have moments where I feel like I'm dropping every single ball. But I have to say that when I work with my clients on developing a crystal clear vision of what they would love. So it's a heart space. You're coming from what would you really love, not what do you think is possible. And so I practice what I preach. And I did the same thing. Like, I got pregnant when I was really old, because that was part of my vision. I thought I was going to have babies in my 30s. I got pregnant when I was 45. And so after practicing, these things that I'm working with my clients on, I had a vision for what I wanted my business to look like and the kind of mom I wanted to be. So I didn't like fly into it without any sort of like internal, I always like to call it like your internal GPS, like where your heart space is. And I made the decision to, have certain days a week where I'm just fully working, and obviously, I see my son after work, but there's Mondays and Fridays where I do have some support here and there on those days, but those are days that are dedicated to my son and time with him. And that was a decision I made when I was on maternity leave, when I was really feeling into what I would love, because I love serving my clients. I love serving my business. And I also, I've been given this beautiful gift of a baby at 47, or 46, I had him. And I'm like, I'm not going to just bypass this by working all the time, because it was part of what I had designed for my life. So it was another kind of leap. Like, I don't know if this is all going to work, but this is what feels in alignment with me and my values. And so here I am, I'm going to go for it. And so that's I'm still navigating, and at any point, I always give myself permission. And I think this is something that I think is important for other people too, is like, at any point you can reevaluate, like give yourself permission to go down a path. And if it doesn't feel right, you can tweak it, so that's something that I have to remind myself, like, at any point I could add back in Mondays and Fridays, or at any point I could add back in, whatever for my business. But right now, this is what is serving me and my clients. And I've been able to grow my business by means of 3 days a week for my clients. Not that I don't do anything on Mondays and Fridays. I do when he's napping. I'm like on the computer and doing my thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember a couple of times when we were on the Athlete Soul calls last year, you would have him on there with you on your lap while we're doing the calls. And I always thought that was so cool, because it's like, you're literally doing both. You're not sacrificing. You didn't say, oh, I can't make the meeting, but then you weren't on there and not giving your newborn at the time attention. So I always thought that was really cool. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question, because, shout out to all the moms who tune in. Like, I think it's important for people to hear the other side of it. Like you said, it's not always glorious, and you give yourself permission to figure it out. I think you said sometimes you feel like you're dropping all the balls. And for someone like you, people from the outside looking in may be like, oh, Erika has it all together. Erika has it all figured out. But then when you share that, that like I even had a sigh of relief. You know, I'm not a mother. I don't have kids. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I do want to take advantage of the fact that we have a therapist on the line in you. What advice can you give to athletes? I don't want to say who are lost. I've been trying to get away from that. Athletes who are in the discovery process and trying to figure out who it is they want to become and what they want to do now that they're no longer competing.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Well, first of all, and I think this is so hard. I mean, this has been hard for me, and I knew I wasn't going to become a professional athlete, but like just knowing, having an understanding and a knowing, like an inner knowing that you are way more than anything you do. I think that that's really important. And I think just in our society now, it's so easy to just be defined by what your job is or what your career is or your sport or so that's one of the things that when I speak with clients, we look at like the identity piece and then really like getting some clarity around like, what is it about you? What makes you who you are? And then, you know, everyone is unique as their thumbprint, at risk of sounding cliche, but like there are unique skills and talents and abilities and even things that have made you an amazing athlete that are absolutely transferable. So what I love working with clients in is kind of igniting the fire of another dream, because generally speaking, there's been a fire there for whatever the sport is. And, you know, it ends it for whatever reason. There's all the stories, as we all know. But I would just say, like, first of all, reach out for help. And then second of all, that there's absolutely something out there for you that has your name on it, that ignites you just as much, if not more sometimes, than the, being the athlete and performing the sport. And realizing like you're more than this. You're more than anything that you will do. You're more than anything that you will accomplish. You are more. And so I think that is one of the most important things. And I mentioned spirituality earlier, and I'm not talking about going to church. I'm talking about like a belief that there's a power breathing you. Call it the inverse, call it God, whatever you want to call it. But that power that allows us to wake up has life wanting to express through us. So all we have to do is kind of get in alignment with that and then make decisions from that place. And I've seen it time and time again. Things will open up. So even if you're in kind of this phase of kind of unrest or chaos or feeling like you're stuck, I would actually say that that's the good news, because now you have the opportunity to reflect and find something else. If you're just kind of going through the motions and not really giving any time or attention to those feelings, you don't have an opportunity to change anything.
I really love the way you phrased that, because I reflect back to my time when I was trying to figure it out, and there was a lot of self-loathing, and not in a healthy sense of like processing the emotions, but just self-loathing, feeling sorry for myself, and not putting in. And the reason I'm sharing this is for anyone who may be going through this, so we can really absorb everything that Erika's sharing right now. And then also, I love what you shared about getting excited about this period and looking at it as an opportunity. I think if I would have had you in my ear, anyone in my ear at that time saying, hey, don't be down about this, like just create. And that's the great part about it, is that, like you said, once you're in that period of discovery, you can create, you can start to create. So it's actually a good thing if you think about it. And then I love another thing you shared about how it's about, you can find something just as exciting, if not more. It's the if not more that gets me excited. Like when I feel like it's game day when I get on one of these things. My armpits are sweating. I'm nervous. I'm like, let's go, another panel. And so I think if people can really get that ingrained in their mind that there is something more, you just have to not only do the work to discover it and find it, but also cultivate it. And that's how things really start to open up for you.
One more thing that I wanted to just add as a therapist, and I think it's really important. It doesn't mean you're doing a bypass on the grief or the loss or any of the feelings that are associated with stopping a sport that you loved and that you devoted your whole life to for X amount of years. So it's kind of a both and, it's not an either or. And I say that because even as a therapist and as a coach and as an athlete, I find myself trying to just bypass the feelings a lot. Like, okay, well, what's the learning in this? Or how can I get better? But it's like, no, there's that phrase, you got to feel to heal, it's true. So it's kind of like having the feeling and allowing for the grief and the confusion and whatever. So you're allowing for it and also knowing this is an opportunity. So it's not, you're not just being like, oh, I'm putting on my rose-colored glasses and everything's going to be fine, because that's really superficial and that's not what I'm encouraging. So I just wanted to mention that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. Got to process it. You heard it first from a therapist, folks. You heard it. So listen to that. Make sure you process what you're going through. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to suppress it or numb it. Talk to somebody. Even if it's not a therapist, talk to a family member. I always tell people just, talk to a best friend or anybody just to get it off your chest. But of course, eventually you might want to seek some professional help as well. I want to go back to what we were talking about with this creating the next chapter of your life as an athlete. So I look at you, my question is kind of more so not about how do you create it, but more so about staying open to opportunities. And the reason I say that is because I think a lot of times, and I was guilty of this too, when you're an athlete, because you're good at a certain thing, the world is kind of handed to you on a silver platter. So you're used to everyone coming to you with opportunities and different things because you're so good. Whereas when that's over, you have to actually be the one to go out and be proactive. And you do so many different things. I mean, you have your private practice, your coaching business. Every time I look up, you have another webinar. I know you're partnered with, you and I are both coaches for Athlete Soul. Shout out to Miriam Glez, who's been on the panel. You also do some work with ATS, Athlete Transition Services, with Jonathan Orr, who's also been on the panel. So you have all these different things, but they didn't necessarily just show up on your doorstep. Can you speak a little bit about staying open to opportunities as they come, being able to identify them, but also being in full out creation mode to make those opportunities? That's my question. I know I went a few different directions, but
I think it's a brilliant question. And one of the things that, and I alluded to this earlier, but like I mentioned, a vision. So that's one of the things that I think is so powerful, is asking yourself the question, what would I love? And I work with my clients in a 4-quadrant system. So you look at your health, your relationships, your time and money freedom, and your vocation, your career. And when you are coming from a soul place, what would I love? Not what do I think is possible or what do I think I can do based on history, but what would I love? Like if truly anything was possible for me, what would I love to create? And then dream that up and as much specificity as you possibly can. And here's the thing that I think is so powerful. And I learned this from my mentor, Mary Morrissey, with the Brave Thinking Institute, which is where I got certified as a coach. But then you reverse engineer it. So everything's worked out. You're living the life of your wildest dreams. You've dreamed it up. You've got the house, you've got the career, you're making the impact that you want to make. You're serving the people you want to serve. You're being the person you would love to be in the world. And then your eyes are opened to what you're saying, the opportunities, the connections, so just for an example, the way Jonathan Orr and I got connected, I was talking with one of my therapists in my private practice, one of my clients, and he just alluded to the fact that somebody that he knew was also doing something that I wanted to do in the athlete transition space, because he was also an athlete. So he was telling me. And then I was like, so I looked him up online. And then I was like, I'm just going to reach out to him because it sounds like he's doing great work. So I did. And then I think within 30 minutes, he called me. So I was like, see, you make this welcome, but you can't make this stuff happen, but it won't be made welcome in the absence of a crystal clear vision of what it is that you would love to create and who you want to serve and how you want your life to kind of unfold for you. So I think that's really important because once the vision is clear, you can attract opportunities and resources and people. You're on the same wavelength, so to speak. And this is another thing that one of my mastermind partners used to work for Apple when Steve Jobs was working there. And he wasn't working directly with Steve Jobs, but he was the director of finance. And one of the things that he said was so amazing to watch was that Steve Jobs could easily just come in faced with a gazillion opportunities and he'd be like, nope, yes, nope, nope, nope. And it's because his vision was crystal clear. So he was able to make really fast decisions because he knew stuff that was not in alignment with his vision and what was. And I think it's the same exact thing for our lives. And when we're making the leap to entrepreneurship, or, you know, have a vision of what it is that you would love. And I mean, that's easier said than done. I mean, I work with my clients on this through, you know, a lot of different workshops and things like that. And also my coaching, so that people can get really clear on what it is that they would love for their lives. But I think that's probably the number one thing that I would say is a game changer.
Right. You can't execute on those opportunities or be able to identify them if you're not clear. And like you said, or if you're not putting yourself in position like you did with reaching out to Jonathan. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was so good. I wish we had more time, Erika. We're definitely going to have you back on. I think you and I will do a solo episode because I know we have some exciting projects in the works, which we will keep under wraps for right now. But before we get out of here, can you please tell people how they can get in contact with you, where they can follow you on social media, all of that, please?
Yes, thanks. So my website is maximumachievementcoaching.com, which I know is a mouthful. On Instagram, I'm just Erika Fay. So it's pretty easy. It's ErikaFay. You can find me right there. And that's my Maximum Achievement kind of page. And I'm also on Twitter at Erika LMFT. So that's an easy find too. And I'm on Facebook, Maximum Achievement Coaching on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, Erika, I know I gave you some mushy acknowledgments up front, but I'm going to say thank you again for all that you've done in my life, for all that you work, all the work that you do, not only for the athlete community, but everyone that you serve and impact. So definitely appreciate you taking some time to be here with us on a Saturday, and we will be in touch very soon. Thank you again.
Awesome. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Taj.
Thanks, Erika. Bye-bye.